Dorothy Kessler was 90 years old when a letter from her bank told her that her account information had recently changed. She read the sentence twice. She hadn't changed anything. She hadn't touched a computer in months. As far as she knew, nothing about her account was any different than it had been the week before, or the year before that. Dorothy had banked at the same branch in Canton, Ohio, for over 50 years. She had a modest savings account, a small pension, and a habit of checking her balance in person once a month, the same way she'd done since her husband passed. She had never used online banking. She'd never needed to. Her statements came in the mail, the way they always had, and she trusted that arrangement the same way most people her age trust it, without giving it much thought at all. That trust and that routine were about to become the exact thing someone else needed. So, here's the big question this story runs on. If Dorothy never logged into an online account, never answered a suspicious phone call, and never clicked a single link, how did nearly $2 million end up moving out of accounts that belonged to people just like her? To understand that, we have to go back to a bank employee whose entire job was supposed to stop this from happening. Dorothy isn't a real name. Court records in this case never identified any of the victims individually. More than 100 people were affected, and their identities were protected throughout. But everything in this story is drawn directly from the criminal case against a man named Yue Xiao, based on evidence presented at his federal trial in the Northern District of Ohio. If you're picturing a scammer cold calling from overseas, or a stranger posing as a government official, that's the shape most fraud stories take. It's the pattern we've all learned to watch for. This one breaks that pattern completely, and that's exactly what made it so dangerous. Yue Xiao worked at an Ohio-based bank as a quant analytics manager. His job existed specifically to help protect customers from fraud. He had access to confidential account data that most employees never see, the kind of access that exists because someone has to be trusted with it. Starting around 2022, prosecutors say Xiao began identifying a very specific type of customer: elderly account holders who had never enrolled in online banking. Dorothy was exactly that kind of customer. Using an offshore service, Xiao created email addresses in victims' names, not his own name. Theirs. Then he used those new addresses to enroll them in online banking himself, without a single one of them knowing it had happened. Once that was done, he redirected their bank statements and account notifications away from the mail and straight into the inboxes he had just built. From that point forward, Dorothy's bank believed it was communicating with her. Every login alert, every notice, every statement. All of it was landing somewhere she would never see. Here's the head fake at the center of this whole case. Most fraud needs the victim to make some kind of decision. Answer the call, trust the story, click the link. Dorothy never got the chance to do any of that, because she was never part of the conversation to begin with. The fraud wasn't aimed at convincing her of anything. It was built to remove her entirely and replace her with an identity Xiao controlled. This is also why it worked for so long. A stranger calling from nowhere raises instant suspicion, even in someone who isn't especially cautious by nature. It's a jarring, unfamiliar moment, and most people have some kind of guard up for it. An employee inside the system Dorothy already trusted didn't have to overcome that instinct at all, because there was nothing for her instincts to react to. She never picked up a phone. She never read a strange message. The redirected statement wasn't intercepted after the fact. It was rerouted from the very start, quietly, using access that existed specifically because customers like Dorothy were supposed to be protected by it, not exposed through it. It's worth sitting with how unusual that makes this case. Almost every fraud story eventually comes down to a moment where the victim had a choice, even if it was a bad one made under pressure. There was no such moment here. Dorothy was never given anything to decide. That's not a failure of judgment on her part. It's the entire design of the scheme. With that access secured, Sal began moving money. Funds went directly from victims' accounts into his own personal bank and credit card accounts. In some cases, he went further, opening brokerage accounts in victims' names without their knowledge, and using their savings to trade options. He even arranged trades between those unauthorized accounts and his own personal brokerage account, positioning elderly victims' money to work in his favor on both sides of the transaction. His targeting wasn't scattered. Victims ranged from 90 to 103 years old, across New York, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Washington, and Ohio. In total, prosecutors say Sal conducted approximately $2 million in unauthorized transfers using this method over roughly a year. Now for the rehook, because this is where the story turns again. A scheme built this quietly, with no phone calls and no victim ever suspecting a thing, should have been almost impossible to catch. So how did it fall apart? It wasn't Dorothy who noticed. It was a pattern. A family member somewhere flagged missing mail that should have arrived and hadn't. A bank's internal monitoring caught account activity that didn't match a customer's usual behavior. That was enough of a thread for the FBI's Cleveland division to start pulling on, and once they did, the scale of what they uncovered kept expanding, past one account, past one victim, into more than 100 identities that had been quietly repurposed without a single person's consent. The case went to a 5-day trial in front of U.S. District Judge J. Philip Calabrese. A federal jury convicted Sal on 10 counts of bank fraud, 4 counts of aggravated identity theft, and 1 count of money laundering. That verdict came down in February 2026. Sentencing hasn't happened yet, but Sal is facing a mandatory minimum of 2 years in federal prison, with a maximum of up to 30. There are a few things worth taking directly from this case, especially if you have an older parent or grandparent. The first is that fraud doesn't always require a mistake from the victim. Dorothy didn't answer a suspicious call or hand over a password. Her only vulnerability was something completely ordinary, not having online banking set up yet. Sal didn't need her to slip up. He needed her account to be dormant, and he treated that gap as an opening. The second is that a stopped or redirected statement is one of the clearest warning signs available, even when nothing else feels wrong. If mail that used to arrive regularly stops showing up, that's worth a phone call to the bank immediately, using a number from an old statement or the back of a card. Never a number or email tied to whatever raised the concern in the first place. The third is that access inside a system isn't the same as safety within it. The person closest to your financial information isn't automatically the person protecting it, and most customers have no way of knowing the difference until something has already gone wrong. Here's what you can actually do with this. If you have an elderly parent or grandparent who hasn't set up online banking, consider helping them enroll themselves with their full knowledge and their password kept somewhere safe, specifically so that option isn't left sitting open for someone else to claim first. It takes 20 minutes at a branch or over the phone, and it closes the exact door this scheme depended on. Check in periodically on whether their statements are still arriving the normal way, whether by mail or email, and ask if anything about their account has looked unfamiliar lately. Most people in their 90s aren't going to spot a redirected notification on their own, not because they're careless, but because there's nothing to spot. The absence of a statement is quieter than the arrival of a fake one. And if anything about an account ever does look off, Call the bank directly using a verified number from an old statement or the back of a card. Never a number or link attached to whatever raised the concern in the first place. Dorothy eventually got her accounts restored, but she never got back the months where her own bank believed it was talking to her when it wasn't. That gap between what looked normal and what was actually happening is where this entire scheme lived. And it's the reason cases like this deserve more attention than they get. Protecting the people we love from fraud doesn't always mean warning them about strangers. Sometimes it means making sure the systems meant to look out for them are actually doing their job. Thank you for watching. If this case is one you'd want your own parents or grandparents to see, share it with them, and subscribe for more real cases like this one.